Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar and welcome. This is the What's New in TeamCity 2018.1 webinar, and my name is Yegor Naumov. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for TeamCity at JetBrains. This webinar is about the new features of the latest release of TeamCity 2018.1. This is the first major release this year, and we're expecting the second one closer to the end of the year, so we are on the yearly release cycle now. And there've been a couple of really exciting features released in this release. And our presenter, who's Anton Arhipov, will demo some of them. And if you don't know, Anton is the developer advocate for TeamCity at JetBrains. And so yeah, he will demo the new features, he'll show them and tell about them. If you want to ask questions, please use the question panel in the GoToWebinar control panel on your right. We will be answering those questions mostly in written-only mode, since we probably won't have enough time. But if there is time, Anton will take a couple of questions. Otherwise, we'll answer them in written mode and then publish them after the webinar as well on our blog. Also, this webinar is being recorded, so we are planning to have the video recording published after the webinar, and you will also receive it in your email once we're done. And I think this is mostly it. I'm now passing it to Anton, and everyone enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everybody. Let's get started. So let me share some of the exciting updates that are new in 2018.1. Before we actually start, I want to mention one thing. For those who want to upgrade to the new version, please read carefully the upgrade notes that are in the documentation and check what are the requirements and what are the new known issues. So in today's webinar, I want to cover Kotlin DSL, the improvements to Docker Runner, the additions to S3 plugin, and some of other minor updates. Let's start with the greatest and the most exciting update for me. It's the Kotlin DSL. And for that, I'm going to use a small project which doesn't have a Kotlin configuration yet. And I will gradually add the configs and the new settings, and we will see what will be happening. So I'm going to use a small application from my GitHub account, which is, well, it's a Spring application. It doesn't do much. The important part is that it builds and it uses Gradle to build. I'm going to create the project from the GitHub and configure a few steps, and then we will see how I can add Kotlin DSL to the existing project, so that you could get a sense of how you can get started. So I'm creating a new project in TeamCity. If my connection permits, proceed. It will suggest me a few build steps. So as normally you would configure TeamCity yourself. And let's configure the artifact as well. So I know it will appear under libs and it will have a pattern as this one. So we have a configuration now, and we can check if it actually builds. And once the build is done, we will start adding the configuration using Kotlin DSL. So let's see. We can see the build log. Hopefully it builds fast enough. Okay. So it's almost there. Now, yes, we have finished the build. We can see the artifact published. And now if I want to add Kotlin DSL to the existing project, what should I do? I should actually go to Edit Settings, enable version settings, enable synchronization here, choose the VCS root. It could be the same VCS root as previously. I mean, the same as for the sources that I'm building from, or it could be totally different VCS root if you want to only store the settings in a dedicated root and have sources under some other directory. Let's select the same, and we will use the settings from the VCS and obviously choose Kotlin format. Make sure that the generate portable DSL scripts option is enabled. We'll later show you why is it portable and why is it important. So once I click apply, TeamCity will generate the settings first, and then it will try to commit. Normally I would wait, but this time I just hit the button and we'll see what happens. So I should see the .teamcity directory in a second under my source root. Yes, I can see that. So .teamcity directory appeared under my GitHub repository. Let's open the project in IDEA and start editing it. So I'm going to pull the settings. Right, it's there. So I'm running in the EAP version of IntelliJ, so sometimes I can see those errors coming up, but don't pay attention. Anyways, here's the TeamCity settings for the project we have just created. And let's go over step by step what's in there already. So this is a generated script. First of all, we can see the version, right? So make sure if you are using the new format, if you want to use the new Kotlin DSL with all those improvements that we are going to talk about, you should make sure that the version is 2018.1. Next one is the the block with the project descriptor. So this is where we register our build configurations. And by build configurations, we mean the build type. So the build type and build configuration is essentially the same. In this case, this is the simplest configuration for a working build. Basically, we have an object that extends the build type. We give it a name. It's the same name as we have in our projects view for the build configuration. So it's the build configuration name, right? Next, we configured the artifact path. So we have this pattern in the project settings. So this is the one. Next one is an interesting one. So we register a VCS root, but we don't give it the URL, the proper URL. So since TeamCity knew that our settings are going to be stored in the same repository as our sources, it basically says that, okay, we should build from the same root where the settings are, right? So this DSL context is an interesting beast. We are going to get back to this one. What can we do with it? But for now, we just know that this is the DSL context that gives us the path to the settings root, and it will be the same as the sources. So the next step is, remember, we have a Gradle project, right? So we define a build step, which is a Gradle task, and we just call the Gradle tasks in there. And the last one is the triggers part, where we define that we want to build when there is a change in the repository. So that's simple. What else could we do? For instance, we would like to actually make our build a little bit more complicated, and for some reason we need another build configuration to do that. Let's define a new build configuration, a new build type. So we give it a name. For instance, it could be something like package. Imagine we are building our jar in the first step, and in the second step we would probably build Docker image for some reason. So if we want Docker image steps, we are going to define a few steps, and probably it should look something like this. In this case, just to make the demo a little bit faster, I'm not going to use the Docker command actually, but I will just create a script. Let's see, I should add a few imports actually. Yes. So we are going just to have one step that is going to echo a line in our log, but nothing else. So just to save some time. Next, the important part here is that we need a dependency. We need to specify a dependency on the build configuration on the previous one. So let's define a new block called dependencies, and we are going to specify a snapshot dependency. Snapshot on the build, right? And if we need an artifact, we can also specify artifacts dependency on the same configuration, and specify what are the artifacts we want to get from the previous configuration. And as it's the build chain, right? We also had like a trigger configured in the previous one. So for this kind of chain, it makes sense to actually remove the trigger from the previous build configuration and add it to the next one, and tell it to monitor for the changes in the dependencies so that it triggers the build for the whole chain. Now it's a little bit of chicken and egg problem here. So when I check in this configuration, the TeamCity will actually generate new internal representation of the project, and will start the build, but it will only start it for the first configuration and not for the second one. This is because it still has the trigger configured for the previous setup, but the next time I'm going to make a change, it will actually work from this from the end of the chain, so it will actually respect those settings that I have created right now. One more thing that I need to do here is to actually register this new build configuration in the project. So I now have a project with 2 build configurations. The second one depends on the first one, and we can actually commit the change and say new build configuration, and let's push it. So we have the new settings right there. So let's check. Yes, we have it in GitHub, and let's see if TeamCity picks it up right now. Yes, the one thing that I should have shown you is how it configures itself when it detects the changes. So if we go to version settings and we check the status of the configuration, we see that it applies the changes. It was running the DSL, and now you can see that the last change, the new build config, was applied. But at this time, the build is already running, so it builds from, only builds the first configuration, but not the second one. Let's see, sorry, it should be visible on the project view. So yes, we can see that it started the build before it generated the DSL itself. So now to actually trigger the chain in a normal mode, let's say we need to make a little change, for instance, add some sort of a small update to the configuration, to the sources, or to the configuration itself, and we will be able to actually see how it runs properly in TeamCity. Let's see, let's do a push. So we just made a small change, and once TeamCity detects the change, to actually trigger the whole chain. So let's see. It should normally take like 10 seconds. You see, it's the two builds are in the build queue, and they are starting, and we will see the whole chain is going to build this time, and we can see the build changes in the tab here as well. So this was easy, right? So we added a new build configuration in the chain. We now have a fully fledged configuration in TeamCity as well. And next, oh, by the way, I didn't show you the new settings of the new build configuration. So just to confirm, right? So we had two build configurations. The first one is the build with Gradle, and another one is the package with a command line step in it. What it does, it just echoes packaging in the build number, and we also have a new trigger, right, which will trigger on the changes in snapshot dependencies. That's what the setting in our VCS trigger did, right? So watch changes in dependencies is this trigger a build on changes in snapshot dependencies. So that's the one. And we also have two dependencies on the previous build configuration. So we have a snapshot dependency on the build, and we have a artifact dependency for the jar for the same build configuration. Okay, so I was mentioning the portability of the new format. The portability is related to the fact that now you don't have to specify a bunch of IDs in those build configurations. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So if I create a new project in the same server instance, let's say go here, and I will create the same the new project from the same repository here. So I will select the same URL, the same VCS root. TeamCity will detect that there is a .teamcity settings KTS in the settings root, and will propose me to actually enable the version settings if I want to, and I may choose to do that. So I will create a new project from the settings. Slightly slow today, but let's see. Okay, done. So we'll have exactly the same configuration. You see two build configurations, exactly the same settings, and we didn't have those IDs specified in there, so it was easy for TeamCity to actually create a new project, and you can this way you can port your projects between the servers, and it's very convenient. So what we could do now is you may ask, why would I actually create two projects from the same root or from the same settings? So it acts kind of like a template, right? So we can build the projects with the same type. If I have only Maven projects, or if I have Gradle projects, which could be built the same way, I can actually use the same script to do that. Or in this case, it will be slightly contrived example, but still fun nevertheless. For instance, we have two projects now, project 10 and project 11. What if I do some conditional things in here? For instance, I create a new build configuration and call it, I don't know, install for some reason, whatever it will be, and have the same script. Sorry, it should be steps first, steps, script, and register it in a project. So I have the third one. But now remember this DSL context object that we can use for various settings that could be common to all the build configurations. And in this case, we can use this one to actually introduce a conditional. So DSL context, we can get a project name from there and check if it's the project name which we want to check actually. Then, for instance, in our case, for a project called app11, we are going to have an extra build configuration, and it will be a snapshot dependency on dependencies, a snapshot dependency on the package, for instance. Okay, so now if I commit this one, I will see an extra build configuration for the second project, right? And let's see how it works. Install build config and push. Okay. Now in a few seconds, TeamCity will detect the change for the build configuration and regenerate the settings for both of those projects. But for the second one, we should be able to see the new build configuration, right? We can actually check if it actually is doing some work in the version settings. Let's see. So it's running the DSL, so it is generating the new project model here. And once it's done, it will actually show us the new build configuration that I've just created. One, two, three. I should be able to see just in a second. Yes. So we see the new build configuration, and we also formed a chain. So we should see the full chain here as well. Yes, so the first one is running, the second one is in the queue, and the third one, since it wasn't in the initial build configuration, it will run a bit later when we make a next change. Okay, so one little gotcha with this own new DSL thingy that we have here is that the ID of the build configuration is an important entity. So all the builds that run under build configuration, they relate to that ID. And in our case, the ID is actually derived from the class name. So what can actually happen now is that if you do some refactorings, for some reason you decided that the first build configuration should be called something else, I mean the class name or the object name itself, and you decide to refactor it, so build app. So the ID will actually change in this case. And now when I commit, I will lose the history. We'll lose the build history in this case. And what I can do to prevent that or fix that if I already made a commit, there are two options. First option is actually to explicitly define the ID itself, ID, and say that it should be built, it should be the same ID as before. Or another option is to go through the UI and attach the history. So let me demonstrate that. So I have renamed the class, and now when I commit, I will actually lose the history. With minor refactoring, what could all go wrong, right, with the minor refactoring? So let's push, and once the configuration is complete, I will see that for the build configuration, I will actually lose the history in both projects. So in the first one and in the second one as well, but we are going to fix only the first one just to save some time. As you can see, it runs already. And probably should refresh. Okay, it will be visible. The change will be visible once the DSL reconfiguration happens. Let's see. Version settings. Need to check if it completed. So it's running the DSL. The build is already running, but the DSL wasn't applied yet. So yes, we now see that the minor refactoring that we did for the configuration is applied. And then once we go to the projects view, we see that there is like a build app configuration which doesn't have a history. Now to fix that, we actually can go into the build configuration and choose attach build history from the actions and choose to attach the history from the old build. Now let's check if the history is back. You see, so we now have fixed this issue. Now the build app, the new configuration with the new name has all the history from the previous builds, and we didn't lose the history now. All right, so if you guys have any questions, don't forget to ask them in the right-hand side panel for the GoToWebinar. I hope my colleagues will answer those questions fully. So now I think I have covered Kotlin DSL topic for sure, and we can move on. So the next one is infrastructural change that we introduced in 2018.1 is the read-only node. So if you go to our website under the what's new, there is like a diagram which you might want to play with. So it basically explains that it is possible to set up a read-only node for TeamCity server. So you will have two servers running the main server, which can start the builds. We can change the settings. You can view the artifacts, view the results, view the build results, and so on. And there would be a second node, which is the read-only node of the server. And then the proxy, the reverse proxy should be configured in front of those two servers so that whoever accesses the server should first access the main server if it's available, and well, it would access the read-only node otherwise. So once the main server goes down, you would be able to read the results, get the artifacts, view the configurations, and so on. One of the requirements is that they should share the same database and obviously the same data directory. So you would probably have to configure the build server directory to be located at the network drive. So that's a small update here, and I'm sure it's important to some of you, and you may check what's inside and try to configure it. Okay, the next step in our webinar is to cover the updates for the Docker runner. So I would like to demonstrate that using a small demo first. So I have a little Docker file in here, which doesn't do much, but we are going to use it to run the builds using our Docker runner. Let's create a new. Actually, I will not create a new, but I have a configured project which I will just update with the new configuration. So I have a Nano service project here. I have run it a few times, but it doesn't have a configuration right now. So let's do some configuring here. So it points to that same GitHub repository, and let's configure some build steps. So the first improvement you will see if you have used Docker Runner before, is that Docker Runner doesn't exist anymore. All the functionality is ported to Docker command build step, and it's displayed as Docker in the list of build steps that you can choose from. So once we choose it, you will see an option for choosing the Docker command. So either build, push, or some other Docker utility command that you can think about. Let's build the project, right? So we want to build it first, and probably should be the Docker file in here. And we can actually tag it as well as we build it. So Anton Arhipov nano server service, and the user build number as a tag version. So build number, for instance. Okay. Redundant percentage. Now we have created the first build step. And what if we want to push the same image that we have just built to the Docker registry? So we can actually define a new build step in here, choose a push, and use the same tag as we used in the previous command. So here it is. I hope I didn't do any typos in here, and it will work. Now, actually, to push the new image that we have just built, I need to be able to log into the Docker registry. And first of all, for this matter, I need a connection. So under Connections tab in the project settings, you can add a new connection either for the Docker registry. I have configured one, so I can just show what's in there. Not many settings, but username, password, and you should be able to push the image. And in the new release, we added a new connection type, which is Amazon Elastic Container Registry. So you can use that one as well if you need. And now, if I run the build, right? So if the build starts for this build configuration, first of all, I didn't specify another thing that is required for this thing to work. Let me go to the build configuration again. So we have a connection, we have defined the build steps, and now we need to specify a build feature, which is a Docker support. So this build feature enables login and logout after the build is complete. And in here, I would specify if I need a cleanup of those registries, of those images, and if I need to log into some registry, right? So in this case, I have configured the connection to Docker registry, and I'm choosing to log in there right before the build. So three things, right? I have configured the build steps. I have created a connection, and I'm using that connection in Docker support build feature. And now when I run the build, that actually started, the Docker build will log into the registry and publish the image when it's done. So we can see the first step completed. It built the new image. The second step actually pushed the image. Yes, it pushed the image to the registry, and now I can actually go and check if my repository actually contains the image with the tag that we have just created. So you can see a few seconds ago, this image was published. It has tag number 10, and it matches the tag that we have just created. So it's Anton Arhipov /nano service and the build number, right? So the build number becomes a tag in this case. And we can actually simulate the removal of this artifact to simulate the cleanup. So if we go and in this build, we call the actions remove. So we remove the build, and it actually will force the cleanup of that image as well in Docker Hub. So this is done. If I go and refresh, you can see the image is now gone, right? So the cleanup works. Now, just to highlight the things that we have just released for Docker Runner. First of all, the Docker command is now there, and it supports different Docker utility commands like build, push, and the others. The other thing that was just added is the support for Amazon Elastic Container Registry, right? So when you want a connection to a Docker registry, you can choose the Amazon one. A few other things that were just added to Docker. Let me show you. So for .NET CLI and PowerShell, we have also support now for to run in Docker container. So here's the .NET CLI step. And at the very end, I can specify the Docker image name where I want this build to run. And this is now done for .NET CLI as well as for the PowerShell build step. Other small improvements like Docker Compose step, for instance. If I choose it from here, Docker Compose now supports multiple configurations that you can specify. So separated with spaces, you can specify multiple YAML files that you can that you want to use for starting the Compose service, as well as for Gradle and Maven projects. It's now possible to configure those build steps to respect the bundled, not really bundled, but the Gradle or Maven installation within the container. Okay, I mentioned the support for Amazon Elastic Container Registry, but we have another nice plugin for Amazon as well that is called S3. So we always had support for S3, or not always, but for a long time. It was a plugin that you would install additionally, download it from the plugins repository and additionally install to TeamCity server. But now the new version comes with this plugin pre-installed, so you don't have to install it, in addition to any configuration that you have. Instead, you can just in the project settings, when you go to the project settings and choose to the artifact storage, you can just create the new storage and choose S3. And it's actually not just Amazon S3, but any S3 compatible storage, and select the bucket. So let's check what is the configuration that I have already here. So I have S3 storage configured already. And what you actually need to specify there is just this bucket name, right? So let me check whatever I have in my personal S3 storage already.
Sorry, Anton, it looks like you lost sound for the last 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. Could
10 seconds?
Please repeat that?
Okay, yeah, I was saying that the only important thing that you need to specify in here is the bucket name for S3, where all the artifacts will be stored. So in here, I have TeamCity storage -Anton as a bucket name, and I have enabled the storage type for this project, right? So there could be only one storage configured. So I have run the builds for this project already. Let me check. So yeah, it's the build number 9, and a few artifacts should be stored in there already. So if I go to S3 console and check what's in the bucket, I will see S3, and I will see the bucket itself, and I can browse and see that Spring Pet Clinic was already built, and I have a few artifacts in there, and Pet Clinic war is the one that we have defined in our build configuration right here, right? So that's the star, and we can check if the actual file is in there, right? So Pet Clinic war is the one that we have published in S3, right? So it's transparent, and if you have artifact dependencies, it will work the same way, so that you don't have to explicitly configure anything. You just say that there is an artifact dependency from one build configuration to another one, and TeamCity will take care of it, uploading and downloading the artifact from S3. All right. And well, the bottom line of this is that this feature is now bundled by default, so you don't have to install anything separately. There are a few other updates that we have in the new version, and one of the cool features that I think is worth mentioning is the improvement for templates. In here, you can see that I have a build configuration which is based on main template. Let's check what's inside. So there are 2 build steps, and the important part here is that with the new templates, it's possible to have common part that would be surrounding the build steps in your build configuration if you base your build configuration on this kind of a template. So in this case, you can say I have a first build step, right, which could be common for all my Maven projects, like clean package. Then I could have multiple build steps that could be defined by the build configuration, and in the end I could have some sort of other steps. Could be cleanup actions, could be report generation or anything else. And how did I do that? So I created a new build configuration which had those 2 steps, and I extracted. Let me switch back to the build configuration actually. So, and I could extract the template. I forgot where did I extract it. Okay, anyways, when you extract the template, you would have those build steps in the template, and then you can reorder the build steps so that the first build step, or whatever build steps you need to do first, then run some like configure the placeholder, which means that all the build steps from the build configuration would be running, and then some after actions or like cleanup actions or whatever you need to do at the end of the build would be placed at the very end, right? So in this case, it's like try finally block for my build configuration. Another important feature, probably the last one that I want to mention today, is the NuGet feed improvements for build configurations. Previously, the NuGet feed was the global one, and probably caused some of the issues, some of performance issues for the users with a large number of projects and artifacts. And now you can configure NuGet or enable NuGet feed for the project, for every individual project that you have. Enable it and enable indexing separately as well. So this is something new in the new version, and I hope a lot of people will find it useful. So I hope I have covered the main features today that I wanted to cover. There's a lot of small minor improvements as well. Team has been doing a great job. I hope you have questions. I hope you've been entertained as well. And let's finish it here, I think.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anton. Thanks everyone for joining and listening to the webinar. As Anton mentioned, there is more to this release. There's been more features released and we've only been able to cover the major ones. If you want to learn about them, just go to the website jetbrains.com/teamcity/what's new, and you'll see the link to the more detailed feature descriptions. Also, as for this webinar, we'll be as I said, publishing the video recording of it, and we'll announce it via Twitter at twitter.com/TeamCity. And also make sure you sign up for the TeamCity blog to see the webinar recording, as well as some select questions and answers for this one. But I think this is it for today. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Anton, for presenting. And have a great day, everyone.